Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Tuba People TV, where we talk about Arnold Jacobs all of the time. Puddles and I are here in Siena, Italy, and we are with Maestro Andrea Conti. Oh my goodness, Maestro,
Hi.
it's so good to finally meet you.
Thank you.
Wow, so when I was researching Maestro Conti, I noticed that his biography was about this big.
At the moment, since 15 years, I am the solo trombone in the Santa Cecilia Orchestra. There is one of the two symphony orchestra in Italy, because the other professional orchestra in Italy are much more involved in the opera.
Okay.
And I am teacher in the university school in Lugano, in Switzerland. That is just a few kilometers out of Milan, so it's Switzerland, but not really far away.
Okay. You have many teachers along the way. William Kramer.
Yeah.
And Kleinhammer.
Yes. When I went to the United States, I already had this occasion to work with American teacher, and the main one was William Kramer from the Florida State University.
Yeah.
And Kramer was the first teacher who, how you say, who faced me to what is an aware technique of playing.
Okay.
I told this story many times. When I had my first lesson with William Kramer, I was already the first trombone in Florence. It was the Zubin Mehta Orchestra, and I was 21. And at the first lesson with him, I played Bozza Ballade, in the mid sonata, and few orchestral chirps. And then he didn't say one word, but at the end he said, "Oh, you play very well, but you have no idea about how to play the trombone."
Ah, okay.
And he told me, "You remind me a kid playing with a game, but you don't know where are the batteries."
Oh, okay. You don't know the
So it was a very strange comment.
Yeah, right.
But in a way, it was dramatically true. Probably I was one of this gifted player, very young, playing very soon in a big orchestra like Florence, with conductors like Giulini, Mehta, and Ozawa, but never understanding a real technique of the instrument.
Yeah.
So what we started with Kramer, it was to understand the technique of the instrument. So I had in that time probably a good breathing, but I was not really aware how much important it was. In a way, I had a quite efficient embouchure, but I never worked on to have a good embouchure. I mean, vibrating embouchure. It was some things that came, but nobody knows why or how.
Naturally.
Probably.
Yeah.
And this was the approach I started with William Kramer. And this kind of approach, it continued with Arnold Jacobs. My first lesson with him, I played a Bordogni, and then he told me some things about the technique, the basic of the technique, and then he told me to work on this, we have to go back to some things more easy, and it was already Rochou.
Yeah.
And then we went back to Concone, and then even back to the number one, and then he said, okay, maybe we can work on this. And it sounds like I was not able to play some things more difficult than the Concone number one, but at the end of the lesson he asked me, do you play the competition in Philadelphia for first trombone? And I said, no. I said, why? No, I heard about the competition too late. And he told me, I can make a call to the guys and have an invitation for you if you want to go there. And these 2 points are probably, it's probably a way to understand which kind of player I was in that year.
Yeah.
So he wanted me play on the competition for first trombone in Philadelphia,
yeah.
But to understand the technique, he put me back to the Concone number 1.
Yeah.
So this was the biggest work I did with myself in all my career. Try to understand the technique of the brass instruments.
Wow.
And try to study some things that probably I had no need in
Right.
that time.
Wow. So that the dichotomy or the difference is, on the one hand, he thought very highly of your playing to put his own reputation on the line and make phone call to Philadelphia to say you should let him play for you. But on the other hand, we have work to do.
Yes.
Yes. Very
yes,
interesting.
of course. And this is something that has to do with what I mean to play a brass instrument. I say to my students sometimes, we have in playing, we have the 2 face of a medal. No, one face is the technique. The other, you say in America maybe the 2 faces of a coin.
Yeah.
Yeah?
2 sides of a coin.
Yeah.
Sure.
So one side is the technique, and one side is the music. In one side there is the technician player. In the other side there is the musician. And sometimes the evolution of these 2 different sides go in contrast with each other. Sometimes the people, they go ahead as a musicians, but they stop to work on the technique, and this is, it's a bomb.
Yeah.
It's a time bomb.
Yeah.
Soon or later, you blow up.
Right.
And
It is.
and this is the reason, because we have so many people with good experience. They know. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Technical difficulty.
Yeah. So this is the reason, because we have people who has the experience. They know how one symphony should be played, but they have no more the technique to play that symphony. You know what I mean? So, and sometimes I feel that this problem, it comes because the people stop to work on the technician side of playing the instrument.
Mm-hmm.
So I know the way you breathe. I know the way the lips are working, so I don't work anymore on these 2 points. But sometimes this point, they leave you.
Mm-hmm. I see.
So we should remain a worker of the instrument. We should dedicate time to our technique, especially when the technique is not a problem. In one lesson with Arnold Jacobs, he told me, Andrea, you are 28, and in a time like this, you will be 40. And when you will be 40, your lungs will be not the same as now,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe your attitude, your way to play could be very different. So you have to work to be in a good shape when you will be 40.
Yeah, work now so that when you're 40.
Yes, probably you have to work on some things that now doesn't seem to be so important.
Yeah.
I have students who can play very well the Schlossberg exercise. Sometimes it's hard to explain them why they have to play that exercise, why they have to continue, don't stop practicing a good breathing and produce a good sound every day, even if they are able to do this, because it's something to do with a little bit like a sport. You are the trainer of yourself, even in a physic way. So, and this point with Arnold Jacobs in this lesson, it was a little bit like this. So you play, but you have to work on how to play the instrument, and this probably opened the street, the point of view of what the Arnold Jacobs teaching it was. I mean, I never used the word school about the Arnold Jacobs,
right?
Because it was something much more near to not a philosophy, but a much big idea,
right,
about playing. And for example, in the book that the people wrote about his teaching, the Also sprach Arnold Jacobs,
Bruce Nelson,
and the title is not a method for brass, is not a school for brass, is a guide to the envelope, sviluppo. So to give to the people the possibility to develop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is, I think, this is the most important point, because
he was really good at setting you up to be your own teacher with these ideas.
Because when you are a teacher, it's quite easy to form some copy of yourself. You know, I teach you the way you have to play these orchestral chirps, but what's happened, you don't develop as musician, and you stop the part that Arnold Jacobs called song. You have to develop your song. You have to know the way you want to play the orchestral chirps, and then your body, with the technical instructions, when you have enough instructions, the body will find a way to play that orchestral chirps in the way you conceive, you imagine.
So you have to think about things. You can't just check a box. You actually have to give some thought to how you want it to sound.
Yeah.
And what is the phrase? What are you trying to communicate? What's the emotional content? You can't just put nothing out there.
Yeah, and another point I try to make clear with my students, we speak about the human being mind like the biggest and the most powerful computer in the world, you know? So if you have the most powerful computer in the world, you cannot use that computer to open and close the bar of a parking place. So if you have this power in your mind, you cannot believe that playing a brass instrument is use your mind to blow air faster or slower and take your embouchure firm.
Yeah.
I mean, this is something that every printed board can do.
That's not the point. Yeah.
You don't need the biggest NASA computer to do that work. So playing is not complicated, it's not difficult, but it's more complete, is more complex maybe than only take a breath and blow out, or you know what I mean.
Absolutely. Okay. So basically, I remember Jacob saying that it doesn't take much skill to play a brass instrument, the intellect is really where you want to be using it with the music making, the artistry,
Yeah.
the emotional content. But to blow these kinds of things, it doesn't take a lot of your brain. It's
No.
the music making. Is that what you mean?
Yes, and there is a very famous example of Arnold Jacobs putting the player as the same kind of a driver. When you drive a car, you don't know exactly what's happened in the car, in the engine, but you have to control the car
With the steering wheel.
yeah, with the
Yeah.
control panel, and in the same way, you cannot drive to, we are in the beautiful Siena, but you cannot drive to Rome without gasoline in your car,
Right.
and you cannot drive to Rome if one of your tire is not inflated. So you have to know the basic of the car. The wheels, tire, the engine, oil, water,
Yeah.
something, lights.
Yeah.
No, you don't need to be a mechanic, but you need the basis. So this is some things that we can put to the player. You don't need to know every deep aspect of the technique, but you have to know that you cannot play without air. So you must have an idea, but if you don't have energy enough, the idea will never come out from the instrument.
Right.
So the balance between these points is very important.
Yeah.
And never stop the fantasy, the
Imagination.
intelligence, the imagination
Yeah.
that the students or the player should have to play an instrument. So this is probably the big reason, because the students have to sing, because we know our voice much better than any other instrument, so we can make clear and extern our ideas through the voice.
Right.
And then when you have this idea, you have a teacher in your head, in
Yeah.
your mind. You want to play that way, and probably you will find the way to play,
Yeah.
to reproduce that result.
So when you had that first lesson with Mr. Jacobs, and he worked on Rochu number 1, and you went back. Why did you go back later? Why did you have more lessons?
Because every lesson with him, it was a homework. So in the first lessons, I had to make clear this point, these different steps of playing: moving air, produce a buzz, and with the buzz produce a good sound, with the good sound make beautiful music. And it was some things to work on. And then we had we spent some time on the lip vibration with the rim.
Oh, the rim.
And try to understand that the vibration is our engine.
Okay.
It's the motor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and the way you care about the engine is the way you care about the sound, is the way you care about your possibility to make the beautiful music. And sometimes we have to work against the nature. I mean, Jacobs said, we as a human being, we are the result of thousand and thousand years of evolution to survive in this planet.
Mm-hmm.
But the human being is not done to play an instrument. So we have some instinct that always goes against the player.
Mm-hmm.
When we breathe, our body tries to have the feeling we are full. We don't need to breathe more. We can stay better breathing less. But as a brass player, we need air. So we have to go against this protection, because our body tries to protect himself from too much breathing, too much oxygen.
Right.
So we have to work a little bit against this point. When we play the low register, our throat, the back part of the tongue, even if we don't need, or even if we don't like to have, but our tongue close the flow of the air, and then we go in trouble with some range of the instrument. So try to discover every implication of the playing. It was a very good reason to go back to Arnold Jacobs every time as possible.
During those lessons that you had, can you remember something that was very big, a big idea that was maybe very general, but then also something that was very specific to you that was
Yeah, one of the general teaching I had in the lessons, for example, has to do with the tongue.
the tongue. Okay.
Because sometimes the brass players and the brass teachers try to correct the use of the tongue, or try to use the tongue in a way, I mean, as players. But what Arnold Jacobs told me, it was the tongue is born and is done to speak.
Right. Okay.
So this is the only line, like a telephone, is the only line you can reach the tongue and speak with the tongue.
To control it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To tell the tongue what the tongue has to do, you have to speak with the tongue in a speak level.
Yeah.
So the pronouns, the exercise has to do with something very near to the way you speak.
Yeah.
There is no a position of the tongue to start a note. There is a syllable like ta that is perfect to start the note. And the tongue probably never learned another position. And this was something, I mean, very big.
Yeah.
And something completely small, because the lessons with Arnold Jacobs, the lesson was always very personal. It was to you. And I remember when I played the low register, and the low register in that lesson, it was more problematic than the high register. So he told me, you have to use your muscle to blow more air in the low register, because you break the air in that register. And it was something that it was probably only for me in that moment. It was not for all the people in the world.
Yeah. But it was something specifically for you, and
Yes.
and the whole using the patterns of speech to play, with the control of the tongue and these types of things. Yeah, he was so much about finding the product that you were trying to achieve rather than the method to get there. And because the patterns of speech already exist, then you just access those so easy. I remember that with him as well. For those of you who don't know, Maestro Conti translated Bruce Nelson's book, Thus Spake Arnold Jacobs, into Italian.
Yes.
Is that correct? Yeah. And,
Yes.
and what was that process like? What did you learn about Mr. Jacobs from doing that? Let's say that book is so it's only this thick, but it's.
I made a calculation about that book.
Yeah.
And the price of that book, it should be about $19,000. But the book, of course, you can buy the book for 19 euros.
Yeah.
But the value is unbelievable. And what I learned and what I think is the danger with that book, the people read that book very fast, very in a very fast way, like a journal.
Yeah.
But on my opinion, we should stop to every point. Every sentence in that book, it was a lesson of Arnold Jacobs to somebody. So in the possibility that you have the same problem of that people, that sentence, it was the way Arnold Jacobs tried to help you. So we don't have to read this book in a very fast way, in a very fast reading.
Should think about it.
Yeah, and maybe don't try to take too much from that book. Try to concentrate. You know, on my lessons, Arnold Jacobs divided the lesson in 3 20 minutes period.
Oh.
So we started at 6 o'clock.
Yep.
And then he said, what do you work on? And I said maybe the staccato. So at 6:20, the staccato was better, and I said, okay, and now what do you like to work on?
Yeah.
So we should decide if I could go to Arnold Jacobs for a lesson, what I would like to have from him. An advice or a solution for the staccato, or a solution for the legato, or to have the same sound to different range. So we should not read that book like a method for trumpet or a method for tuba.
Right.
We should try to keep in that book the informations that Arnold Jacobs gave
to Bruce Nelson,
and the information he would give to you, because the book is the result of 140 hours of recording.
Yeah.
And the lessons, it was not all with Bruce Nelson. They put together lessons with many other people.
I see.
And I think that Brian Fredrickson made a big help on this project. So maybe in that sentence, it was for a Japanese guy coming from Japan to have some help about the low register.
Yeah.
And then when you see another sentence, maybe that sentence, it was to a Spanish guy with some problem with the tongue, or to a Sweden, people from Sweden. You know, you should be aware about this. You are listening a lesson. You are not reading an article in a trombone magazine. And the aspect of the brass playing in that book is so wide.
It is. It's immense, and
you know, one of the big help I had to make this translation, it was, for example, to have people like Robert Tucci as a colleague.
Right.
I played with Bob for 6 years.
Yeah.
And I am very, very proud to say that we have a very good and very friendly relationship. So in every moment I was in the condition to make a call to Bob and say, Bob, what do you think about this sentence? What I have to emphasize to that sentence? And the same, it was the possibility to call Charlie Vernon. During that translation, I had many calls, sometimes through Skype, sometimes on the telephone, with people like Rex Martin, with people like Charlie Vernon, to speak about some things and try to have more information. And I will tell you a very strange situation, but is a way to make clear another point about Arnold Jacobs. I worked on the translation. I had in the orchestra in Rome, I had an English tuba player, James Goodley.
Oh yeah, sure.
And then, you know, he's a mother language in English, so he was able to read every sentence and try to keep some strange point of one word. And then he told me that the person who had the biggest influence on my playing, it was Arnold Jacobs, and I never met him in person.
Gourlay's biggest. Oh, no kidding.
So I mean, it's something very special.
Yeah.
When you are able to influence a person, a player, even if you don't meet this person in your life.
Yeah. You know, this. I remember Dee Stewart talking about how his wife would often accompany him, Dee Stewart, to lessons with Jacobs and take notes for Dee on 3x5 cards, little cards. And then they kept talking about Jacobs. You know, you should write a book. You should write a book. And for whatever reason, Jacobs didn't. But one time at a lesson, Mrs. Stewart, Dee's wife, handed Mr. Jacobs these set of 3x5 cards that were from all of Dee Stewart's lessons and said, "Mr. Jacobs, here's your book." And he very politely said, "No, that's Dee's book. That is for Dee. That's not for everybody.
Yes.
That's for Dee."
I believe.
Yeah.
I haven't.
So this gets to what you're talking about.
It's not difficult to believe for me, because these cards, it was what Arnold Jacobs said to
Dee Stewart.
Dee Stewart, not to everybody. And if you read the special studies,
right, Hal Leonard.
Yeah, this a small book. It's 19 pages probably. I think that when you read this, you think, okay, this is very general. It's only on the surface. But this is the deepest as possible you can write in the paper.
Yeah, right. Because otherwise, then he's speaking to a specific person.
Yes.
Right.
So I think in these studies, I mean, he confirmed his greatness.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, the time that you had to spend with him must have been amazing. I know that his own teacher at Curtis, Philip Donatelli, came from Italy, and so was there any sort of special collegiality because you're Italian? He wasn't Italian himself, Jacobs, but
no,
he.
I will tell you some things about that lessons, and I hope nobody will be angry about this.
Okay.
But in that time, the lessons with Arnold Jacobs had a fee.
Yeah.
I don't tell you what, but he made a $25 discount for the people coming from outside America.
Oh.
I mean, he told us, "Oh, okay, guys, you come from Europe. My lessons are a little bit cheaper for you."
That was generous of him.
And I remember one of the lessons we had before to leave Chicago. I mean, in that day, very late in the night, we had the flight to come back to Europe, and his driver came. I think the name was Mike in that case, maybe Mike, came with a car. It was probably 6 o'clock, and he said, "Mr. Jacobs, it's 6 o'clock. We have to drive home." And he said, "Mike, these gentlemen, not guys, these gentlemen, they come from Europe. They come from Italy. So we have to go to the other side of the city. Come back in half an hour." And then he started to to give us some homework.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have to work on this. Don't forget this and do this. And then, after half an hour, Mike came again. Say, perfectly in time.
Yeah.
He said, Mr. Jacobs, and say, yeah, you know, come in half an hour. You know, the guys here, they go back to Italy. I mean, I think this was his way to care about us.
Yeah.
It was his way to respect people coming from the other side of the world to have a lesson with him. You know, we came to Chicago to have a lesson with the legendary Arnold Jacobs. I always heard about him, and some colleagues of mine in Napoli in the year before, they spoke about Arnold Jacobs, and my teacher always said, you know, there is this tuba in the Chicago Symphony. He's a big teacher. He's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I had the possibility to fly to Chicago to have lesson with him, and I think this kind of respect was the way for him to appreciate the fact that we fly to Chicago to have lessons with
Right.
him, you know?
Yeah. I'm sure he was thrilled that you would come and respect him by wanting a lesson and wanted to be respectful to you.
And we had, when I went to Chicago the first time, I used my friendship with Roger Bobo to fix the lessons. So in some way, Roger spent his words to fix a lesson for us. So I never came through this process of call Arnold Jacobs and have a lesson.
Bravo. Bravo, Roger. Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, it's going to be 20 years next month. This is 2018, September, since Mr. Jacobs has passed away. And some of the things that I've noticed over the last 20 years is when people talk about Jacobs who didn't know him, they immediately think, oh, he's the breathing guy, or he had the one lung. It seems like they minimize him, or they put him into a small little box, and he was, I mean, it's hard to say fully with words how big he was.
Yeah, speaking about Arnold Jacobs as the guy of the air is like a comma in a book. It's so small. The way he went deep in playing an instrument, the way he studied the physic aspects of playing the instrument, much more than a doctor. So he really went deep to this field of art. And this is probably the big risk we have. The risk is to lose his huge experience. Because what's happened in the music, too much of the teaching, too much of the sharing information is in words. We speak to the students. You know, if you go to the university to be a cardiologist, the doctor of the heart,
the heart,
probably you have to do 50 or 60 exams. And in every exam you have to explain something. You have to really understand the field. You know what I mean? But if you play first trumpet in an orchestra, probably you had 2 or 3 exams with the trumpet in your life. You never had to explain to the people that you understand. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and probably the rate is the same. In the medicine, you don't have the risk to lose experience, because the way you study, the way you teach, it preserves the informations. If somebody in China is able to change you the liver, this experience cannot be lost, because the people will fly to China, they make a movie, they will try to assist you in the operation, to try to share the information.
Right.
But if somebody is really able to teach you a brass instrument in Chicago, only few people fly to Chicago, only few people understand what's happened, and the other people say, okay, this is the guy, yeah, you have to breathe more because he had just one lung. You know, this is
he had two, by the way.
Yeah. But this is the big risk. So I think we have to try to protect, we have to try to preserve these informations. The people like me who had the possibility to study with him, and also the people who are too young for this, but who has the possibility to understand this kind of, not philosophy, but a big way to think about the music, the widest way to think about play an instrument. We have to defend this kind of idea. And let me say some things that Edward Kleinhammer told me. One of the teacher I had when I had my time in Chicago. Kleinhammer told me, if you have a place in a major orchestra, is a dedicated life. If you have a faith, if you believe so strong, you become priest and you dedicate your life to the religion. If you get a position in a big orchestra, you have to understand that your life is dedicated to the instrument. To play with a colleague, to play well with a colleague. And I think we as musicians, we have to dedicate not our life, but maybe some hours every week to preserve this big idea. There was the Arnold Jacobs teaching and informations. You know, every teachers I met in that time leave me some things. I remember the lesson with Crisafulli, and he always tried to make the play more easy.
Yeah.
You know, don't worry, it's pretty good. You know, but these words, pretty good. It was pretty good. And then he started to have you play better.
Yeah.
So pretty good, it was pretty good, but it was not perfect. But never make too much weight on you.
Yeah.
And I remember the power that Kleinhammer had teaching. I remember when I made a call to him to have a lesson, and he told me, okay, my lessons cost halfway of an Arnold Jacobs lesson, 50%. But my lessons are 3 hours.
Yep. Right.
If you leave before the 3 hours, I will never give you a lesson. And I will try, nobody made a lesson to you. Because you made no respect for myself.
Wow, red card.
If you come to, here's a red card.
card.
If you come to me, you have to stay there 3 hours, because I need 3 hours to explain. Yeah, okay, good. So, and you know, and Kleinhammer, it was no more in the orchestra since 10 years, but the power he had about the music, he was singing so loud and so powerful, and you really understand how much these persons gave to the music, or maybe how much the music gave to them.
Yeah.
it was something really inspiring.
That's great. Just to tie this all up, you had said something earlier about how a lesson prior to Jacobs was one thing, and post Jacobs it was a different thing, and brass playing prior to Jacobs was one
Yes.
way, and brass playing after Jacobs was another way. And
Yes, uh, there are some people who really made the difference. I mean, we had beautiful trumpet players before Maurice André, but Maurice André was the point. After him, to be a good player, you should do something more than before.
right.
I mean, and we had good horn players before Hermann Baumann, but Baumann fixed a standard for the horn soloist. I mean, Strauss first from Hermann Baumann is the milestone. And okay, people would say no, it was not Baumann, it was another one. Yes, but the recording, the concert. So when you do many tours in the United States, playing as a soloist, like Hermann Baumann did, you fix the standard, and the horn playing is different before and after. So I think Arnold Jacobs was absolutely one of these milestones. The way the people was teaching, also playing the instrument, the way Arnold Jacobs means the tuba in the orchestra, it was something completely new, completely different. I have a big respect of many tuba players, but for example, if you listen this recording with the Gabrieli pieces with the three different orchestras,
yeah.
I mean, the other tuba players are beautiful
Yeah.
people.
Oh yeah.
But when Jacobs plays, the group sounds in another way. So this kind of fundamental, to be the fundamental where Adolf Herzog was the point.
Right. Adolf Herzog. Yeah.
You know, Zubin Mehta told me one time, the piano is the prince of the instruments, but the orchestra is the queen of the music.
Oh.
And the trumpet is the crown of the queen.
Oh.
So, and on the crown you have the diamonds, you know.
Right.
So this
right.
is a beautiful image.
Right.
I mean, the orchestra with these wide colors, with different instrumentation, when is the queen of the music, but the trumpet. So I think, you know, Arnold Jacobs was the body of the orchestra, to have the queen. The queen worked very well, and the queen was very able to stay, you know, in a regal position.
Regal position.
Because down it was Arnold Jacobs. And I mean, this is the point. You know, the way he intends play the tuba in the orchestra, it was something that inspired so many people.
Yeah.
And changed the way you mean the tuba. You know, I had an interview, the same as we and you. I had an interview with Sir Peter Jonas, and Sir Peter was my state intendant to the Bavarian State Opera, and Sir Peter was quite close to Georg Scholti.
Oh yeah.
And he told me when he went to Chicago, he was used to listen Wagner and Strauss with the English orchestra, with this kind of how you say, not really fat sound of the tuba.
Yeah.
And then he went to Chicago, and when he heard the Chicago Symphony, the sound of the tuba was so amazing that even a person who was not a brass player was completely, astonished.
Yeah.
So this is something
Very special.
Yeah, this is
Oh,
you
special.
have to be very special to be notice. I say to be
Yeah,
so
notice.
to impress so much
Sure.
a person who is not a brass player.
Yep.
So in this kind of aspect, I think Arnold Jacobs was one of the genius of our century.
Yeah, it's terrific. Andrea, I can't thank you enough for taking the time, and we have been working for over a year to messaging back and forth, to find a time, and I know you've been extremely busy. You've just given some master classes. You were on vacation. And but you worked me in and gave me. You drove an hour.
It is a
to come
pleasure.
to Siena, and you're going to get some cheese.
Yeah,
while you're here?
yes,
Okay.
they have a beautiful pecorino cheese here in the near to Siena.
Okay, very good. But Puddles and I would like to give you this as a token of our Thanksgiving, this TubaPeopleTV glass. And you can fill it with some whatever you
Thank
want.
you, thank you very much. It will be with some wine and cheese.
Okay, very good.
So thank you.
Thank you, Andrea.
Bye.
It's great to meet you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and now back to you.